The sun cast harsh shadows across the weathered wood of Addison's general store as Penelope Zimmerman's voice rose above the chatter of shoppers. "It is not right that Widow Jenkins was charged double for the same flour Mr. Thornton bought yesterday. How can you defend such practices?" The year was 1875, and in St. Louis, Missouri, a woman with opinions was rarely welcomed, especially when those opinions challenged the established order. When the dust settled that day, Penelope found herself with nothing but a small valise and the clothes on her back, banished from the only home she'd ever known. Her father's final words still rang in her ears. "No daughter of mine will bring such shame to our family name. You are no longer welcome in this house." The stagecoach wheels threw up clouds of dirt as it rumbled westward, away from St. Louis and everything familiar. At 22, Penelope had never imagined finding herself alone, with only her education and stubborn determination to sustain her. But here she was, headed toward the frontier town of Silver Creek, where her mother's cousin had once mentioned needing help with her boarding house. As the stagecoach driver called out to the horses, urging them up a steep incline, Penelope clutched the leather-bound journal in her lap. It contained everything she believed in her thoughts on equality, fairness, and the rights that should belong to all people regardless of their station or gender. The very ideas that had caused her father to disown her. The journey was long, uncomfortable, and fraught with danger. Twice they'd been stopped by bandits, saved only by the quick thinking of the shotgun rider who accompanied their driver. When they finally arrived in Silver Creek 3 days later, Penelope's elegant traveling dress was coated with dust, her dark hair falling loose from its pins and her spirit nearly broken. "Last stop, Silver Creek," the driver called out. "All passengers disembark." Penelope gathered her meager belongings and stepped down into the main street of what would now be her home. The town was smaller than she'd expected, a single main street lined with false-fronted buildings, a saloon already bustling despite the early hour, and various shops catering to the needs of ranchers and miners. It was nothing like St. Louis, with its brick buildings and cobblestone streets. "Miss Zimmerman," a weathered woman with gray-streaked hair approached. "I'm Martha Wilson. My cousin Alina wrote to say you might be coming our way." Penelope nodded, relief washing over her. "Yes, thank you for meeting me. I wasn't certain the letter would arrive before I did." "Well, it did just yesterday." Martha's eyes narrowed as she looked Penelope up and down. "Alina said you were outspoken, said that's why you were leaving St. Louis." Penelope's back stiffened. "I believe in speaking the truth, Mrs. Wilson, even when it's uncomfortable." To her surprise, Martha laughed. "Well, out here, honey, we don't have much time for social niceties. Come along, I'll show you to the boarding house. You can start work tomorrow after you've had a chance to rest." As they walked, Martha pointed out the various establishments: the mercantile, the assayer's office, the blacksmith, and the sheriff's office. The town was alive with activity, men and women going about their business with a sense of purpose that Penelope found compelling. "The boarding house isn't much," Martha explained as they approached a 2-story clapboard building at the edge of town, "but it's clean and the meals are decent. I run it myself since my husband passed 5 years ago." Penelope was about to respond when the sound of pounding hooves drew her attention. A group of riders was approaching from the north, dust billowing behind them. Leading the group was a man seated tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders wrapped in a dust-covered duster, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. "That'll be the Zane brothers returning from their cattle drive," Martha said, following Penelope's gaze. "They own the biggest spread around these parts, the Double Z Ranch, about 10 miles north of town." As the riders drew closer, the lead rider slowed his horse to a walk. His eyes, startlingly blue against his sun-darkened skin, met Penelope's for a brief moment. He tipped his hat in acknowledgement before continuing toward the saloon with his men. "That's Wade Zane," Martha said with a knowing smile. "Oldest of the Zane brothers and owner of the Double Z, not one for town much, so it's unusual to see him here." Penelope found herself staring after the man, struck by the confidence in his bearing and the intensity of his gaze. He seems formidable, Martha chuckled. That he is, fought in the war, came back and built that ranch from nothing with his brothers. Doesn't suffer fools, but he's fairer than most men out here. She nudged Penelope forward. Come along now, you'll have plenty of time to meet the locals once you're settled. The boarding house was simple, but as Martha had promised, clean. Penelope's room was small, containing just a narrow bed, a washstand, a small dresser, and a chair by the window. It was a far cry from her comfortable bedroom in St. Louis, but it was hers, a place where she could begin anew. That evening, after unpacking her few belongings, Penelope sat by the window and opened her journal. The pages were filled with her elegant handwriting, thoughts on education for women, fair treatment for all people regardless of their status, and the changes she believed America needed to make as it recovered from the Civil War. Perhaps here, she whispered to herself, I can find a place where my voice matters. She had no way of knowing how prophetic those words would prove to be. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Penelope, dressed in her simplest gown, a blue cotton with minimal trim, and pinned her dark hair in a practical bun before heading downstairs to begin her duties. Martha had explained that she would be responsible for preparing breakfast for the boarders, cleaning the rooms, and helping with laundry. The kitchen was already warm from the cook stove when Penelope entered. Martha stood at a large table kneading bread dough with strong, practiced movements. Good morning, Penelope greeted her. Where would you like me to start? Martha nodded toward a basket of eggs. Those need to be scrambled for breakfast. There's bacon in the pantry that needs frying too. We've got 6 boarders at present, all men working at the mine just outside of town. Penelope set to work, grateful for the cooking skills her mother had insisted she learn despite her father's objections that such knowledge was unnecessary for a woman of their social standing. As she prepared the meal, she listened to Martha's running commentary about the town and its inhabitants. Silver Creek started as a mining town about 15 years ago. The silver's mostly played out now, but there's still some to be had for those willing to work for it. Most folks around here make their living from ranching or supporting the ranch's blacksmithing, running stores, that sort of thing. And the Zane brothers? Penelope asked, trying to sound casual. You mentioned they have the largest ranch. Martha's eyes twinkled knowingly. Caught your eye, did he? Wade's 30 years old, never married. Too busy building that ranch, I expect. His brothers Morgan and Caleb are younger. Their parents died of typhoid about 10 years back, leaving Wade to raise his brothers and manage the ranch. He's done well by both. Breakfast was a hurried affair, with the miners bolting down their food before heading out to work. Penelope found herself fascinated by these rough men with their weathered faces and calloused hands. They were nothing like the polished gentlemen of St. Louis society, yet there was a dignity in their straightforward manner that she respected. After the miners departed, Penelope and Martha cleared the table and began the day's chores. By midday, Penelope's hands were red and raw from scrubbing floors and washing linens, but there was a satisfaction in the physical labor that she had never experienced before. You're a hard worker, Martha observed as they sat down to a simple lunch of bread and cold ham. Most girls from fine families wouldn't take to this kind of work so easily. Penelope smiled wryly. I'm no longer from a fine family. My father made that quite clear when he cast me out. What exactly did you do that was so terrible? Martha asked, curiosity evident in her voice. Penelope hesitated, then decided that honesty was the best approach. I spoke publicly against unfair business practices. The owner of our general store was charging different prices to different customers based on their social standing. When I confronted him and gathered other women to boycott his store, my father was humiliated. He said I had forgotten my place. To her surprise, Martha nodded approvingly. Takes courage to stand up like that, not many would. It didn't feel courageous at the time, Penelope admitted. It just felt necessary. After lunch, Martha sent Penelope to the mercantile with a list of supplies they needed. Best you start getting to know the town, she said. Finch's Mercantile is just down the main street. Tell him to put it on my account. The afternoon sun was hot as Penelope made her way down the dusty street. Silver Creek was bustling with activity wagons loaded with supplies, cowboys lounging outside the saloon, women carrying baskets of goods. It was a raw, vibrant place, so different from the genteel neighborhoods she had known. As she approached the mercantile, the door swung open and Wade Zane stepped out, nearly colliding with her. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had appeared on horseback. Tall and broad-shouldered, with those piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through her. "Pardon me, madam," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "No harm done," Penelope replied, meeting his gaze directly. A flicker of recognition passed across his face. "You're new in town." "Saw you yesterday with Martha Wilson," Penelope nodded. "Yes, I arrived yesterday. I'm Penelope Zimmerman from St. Louis, Wade Zane." He tipped his hat. "What brings you all the way to Silver Creek, Miss Zimmerman? We don't get many fine ladies out this way." There was something in his tone that both challenged and intrigued her. "I'm hardly a fine lady anymore, Mr. Zane. I work for Mrs. Wilson at the boarding house." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Long way from St. Louis to Silver Creek just for work." Penelope lifted her chin. "Sometimes one has to go where one is welcome," understanding dawned in his eyes. "Ah, running from something or someone, not running," she corrected firmly. "Starting anew." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features. "Well, Miss Zimmerman, Silver Creek's a good place for new beginnings. If you need anything, the Double Z is 10 miles north." With another tip of his hat, he stepped past her and continued down the street toward the bank. Penelope watched him go, aware of a strange fluttering in her chest. Inside the mercantile, Mr. Finch greeted her warmly when she explained who she was. "Any friend of Martha's is welcome here," he said, gathering the items on her list. "How are you finding Silver Creek so far?" "It's different," Penelope admitted, "but everyone has been kind." "Folks out here tend to judge you by what you do, not where you come from," Finch said, wrapping packages in brown paper. "Makes for a more honest way of living, if you ask me." As he worked, other customers came and went. Penelope noticed that many greeted her with friendly nods, seemingly accepting her presence without question. It was refreshingly different from the rigid social hierarchies of St. Louis. When she returned to the boarding house with her purchases, Martha was in the kitchen preparing the evening meal. "Just in time," she said. "I need you to peel those potatoes for supper." As they worked side by side, Penelope found herself telling Martha more about her life in St. Louis, her father's position as a bank manager, her mother's devotion to social climbing, and her own growing disillusionment with the hypocrisy she saw all around her. "I was expected to marry a suitable man," she explained, "one with the right connections and sufficient wealth. My opinions were considered a liability rather than an asset." Martha nodded sagely. "Society has a way of trying to mold women into what men think we should be. Out here, though, a woman's value is in what she can do, not in how well she can hold her tongue." "I met Mr. Zane at the mercantile," Penelope said, changing the subject. "Did you now?" Martha's eyes twinkled. "And what did you think of our local rancher? He seems direct." Martha laughed. "That's one way of putting it. Wade doesn't waste words, but what he says, he means. Man's word is his bond out here, and Wade Zane's word is better than most men's written contracts." The following days fell into a routine. Penelope rose early to help prepare breakfast, spent the mornings cleaning and doing laundry, and the afternoons running errands or helping Martha with whatever needed doing. The work was hard but satisfying, and she found herself sleeping more soundly than she ever had before. A week after her arrival, Martha approached her with a proposition. The schoolteacher, Miss Abernathy, is organizing a small lending library for the town. She's looking for volunteers to help catalog books and manage loans a few hours a week. I mentioned you might be interested. Penelope's face lit up. "I would love to help. I've always believed in the power of education." "Thought you might," Martha said with a smile. "You can go over to the schoolhouse tomorrow afternoon. I can manage here." The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building at the edge of town. When Penelope arrived the next day, she found Miss Abernathy, a bespectacled woman in her 30s, surrounded by stacks of books. "Oh, thank goodness," Miss Abernathy said when Penelope introduced herself. I was beginning to think I'd taken on more than I could handle. These books were donated by families in town and some back east. I want to create a system where people can borrow them, but I need help organizing everything. Penelope rolled up her sleeves and set to work. The books ranged from well-worn primers to leather-bound classics. Together, they sorted them by category and began creating a ledger system to track loans. "This is wonderful what you're doing," Penelope said as they worked. "Education is so important, especially in remote areas." Miss Abernathy nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. I've been trying to convince the town council to allocate funds for more books, particularly for the children. Many of them will never have a chance to continue their education beyond what I can provide here." Penelope paused, an idea forming. "Perhaps we could organize a fundraiser." In St. Louis, we often held literary evenings or musical performances to raise money for causes. Miss Abernathy's eyes widened. "That's a marvelous idea, but who would attend such an event here? Most of the townspeople are hardworking folk who might not see the value in it." "Then we must make them see the value," Penelope said firmly. "Education benefits everyone. It leads to innovation, progress, and a better quality of life." They spent the remainder of the afternoon planning a literary evening to be held in 2 weeks' time. Miss Abernathy would speak about the importance of education, and they would ask for donations toward purchasing new books for the school and library. As Penelope walked back to the boarding house, her mind buzzing with plans, she nearly collided with a rider coming into town. Looking up, she found herself once again face to face with Wade Zane. "We must stop meeting like this, Miss Zimmerman," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. Penelope felt a blush rising to her cheeks. "Mr. Zane, I was just coming from the schoolhouse." He dismounted, leading his horse beside her as they walked. "The schoolhouse, taking lessons?" "No, helping Miss Abernathy organize a lending library for the town. In fact, we're planning a literary evening to raise funds for more books. You should attend." Wade looked surprised. "A literary evening? In Silver Creek? Why not?" Penelope challenged. "Don't people here value education?" He studied her for a moment, those blue eyes thoughtful. "They value practicality, what can be measured in crops harvested or cattle sold. Convincing them to part with hard-earned money for books might be difficult." "Then they need to be shown that knowledge is practical," Penelope insisted. "Books on agriculture, animal husbandry, modern farming techniques, these could directly improve their livelihoods." Wade's expression shifted from skepticism to interest. "You make a compelling argument, Miss Zimmerman." "I usually do, Mr. Zane. It's what got me sent away from St. Louis." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? I assumed you came west for adventure or family." Penelope hesitated, then decided to be honest. "I was cast out by my father for speaking my mind too freely, for challenging injustice when I saw it." Instead of the disapproval she half expected, Wade's face broke into a genuine smile. "Then Silver Creek is fortunate to have you, Miss Zimmerman. We could use more people willing to speak against injustice." They had reached the boarding house. Wade tipped his hat, about to continue on his way when he paused. "When is this literary evening of yours?" 2 weeks from Saturday at the schoolhouse," Penelope replied. "I'll be there," he promised. "And I'll bring some of my men. They could benefit from a bit of culture." As she watched him ride away toward the saloon, Penelope felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. That evening, as she helped Martha prepare supper, Penelope shared her plans for the literary fundraiser. To her relief, Martha was enthusiastic. "It's a fine idea," she said, chopping carrots with practiced efficiency. "This town focuses so much on survival that we sometimes forget about living. A bit of literature would do everyone good." Mr. Zane seemed skeptical at first, Penelope admitted. Martha's eyes twinkled. "But you convinced him?" "I believe so. He said he would attend and bring some of his ranch hands." "Well now, that is interesting," Martha mused. "Wade Zane doesn't change his mind easily. You must have made quite an impression." Penelope felt her cheeks warm. "I simply made a logical argument for the practical benefits of education." Martha hummed, clearly unconvinced by Penelope's casual tone. "Well, if Wade's supporting your event, Others will follow. He carries a lot of influence in these parts. The next 2 weeks were busy as Penelope divided her time between her duties at the boarding house and helping Miss Abernathy prepare for the literary evening. They created posters to hang in the mercantile, the saloon, and other businesses around town. Penelope drafted a persuasive speech about the importance of education and literature, and Miss Abernathy arranged for some of her older students to read passages from classic works. 3 days before the event, Penelope was hanging the last poster in the mercantile when the bell over the door jangled and 3 rough-looking men entered. Their clothes were dusty, and they wore their guns prominently on their hips. Something about their swagger set Penelope on edge. "Well, look what we have here," the tallest of the 3 said, eyeing Penelope with undisguised interest. "New in town, ain't you, pretty lady?" Mr. Finch stepped forward protectively. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. What can I help you with today?" The man ignored him, moving closer to Penelope. "How about an introduction to the lovely lady?" Penelope lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm Miss Zimmerman, Mr. Finch's customer, and you are," the man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Clyde Barton, madam. Me and my brothers here ride for the Circle B Ranch." Something in his tone made Penelope's skin crawl, but she maintained her composure. "If you'll excuse me, I have errands to complete." As she moved to pass him, Barton stepped deliberately in her path. "What's the hurry? Let's get acquainted." "The lady asked you to move aside, Barton." The commanding voice came from the doorway, where Wade Zane stood, his expression hard as granite. Behind him were 2 younger men who bore a family resemblance, presumably his brothers. Barton's demeanor changed instantly, his cockiness replaced by a wary respect. "No harm intended, Zane. Just being friendly." "Your kind of friendly isn't welcome here," Wade said evenly. "Move along." For a moment tension crackled in the air, then Barton shrugged, gesturing to his brothers. "Come on, boys, we'll get our supplies elsewhere." As they skulked out, Wade's eyes met Penelope's. "You all right, Miss Zimmerman?" She nodded, her heart still racing. "Yes, thank you for your intervention, though I could have handled the situation." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt it. But out here, some men only understand one language, and that's another man standing up to them." He gestured to the young men behind him. "These are my brothers, Morgan and Caleb." The Zane brothers were clearly cut from the same cloth, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same striking blue eyes as Wade, though their faces were younger, less weathered by responsibility. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman," Morgan, the older of the 2, said with a tip of his hat. "Wade's mentioned you were organizing some kind of book event." "A literary evening," Penelope confirmed. "To raise funds for the school library. I hope you'll all attend." "Wouldn't miss it," Caleb, the youngest, grinned. "Not every day we get culture out at the ranch." Mr. Finch approached, still looking shaken by the confrontation. "Those Barton brothers are trouble. They work for Edward Blackwell at the Circle B. He's been trying to buy up small ranches around here, and he doesn't take kindly to refusal." Wade's expression darkened. "Blackwell's been pushing boundaries lately, literal ones. We found some of our cattle on his land last week with our brands altered." "Cattle rustling?" Finch asked, alarmed. "Can't prove it yet," Wade said grimly, "but I'm watching." He turned back to Penelope. "You should be careful around the Bartons. They're known for holding grudges." Penelope straightened her spine. "I won't be intimidated, Mr. Zane. I've faced worse than men like that." Something like admiration flickered in Wade's eyes. "I believe you have, Miss Zimmerman. All the same, perhaps one of us could escort you back to the boarding house." Though her instinct was to refuse, Penelope recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. "Thank you. I would appreciate that." Outside, the afternoon sun was slipping toward the horizon, casting long shadows down the main street. Wade instructed his brothers to complete their purchases at the mercantile while he walked Penelope back to Martha's. As they strolled side by side, Penelope found herself studying Wade's profile, the strong jaw, the straight nose, the lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun. "Tell me, Mr. Zane," she said, breaking the comfortable silence between them, "what brought you to Silver Creek?" Wade glanced at her, then looked ahead again. "My father. He brought us here when I was 15, Morgan was 12, and Caleb just 8. He had a dream of building something that would last, something we could all be proud of. The Double Z, Penelope said. Wade nodded. Started with 100 acres and 30 head of cattle. Now we've got over 2,000 acres and a herd 500 strong. There was justifiable pride in his voice. Your parents would be proud, Penelope said softly. A shadow crossed his face. I hope so. They died before they could see what the ranch has become. I'm sorry for your loss. It was a long time ago, he said, though Penelope sensed the wound was still tender. Left me raising my brothers and trying to keep the ranch afloat. You've clearly succeeded at both, Penelope observed. Your brothers seem like fine men. A smile softened Wade's features. They are. Morgan runs the day-to-day operations now, and Caleb has a gift with horses that's bringing in good business from all over the territory. He paused, then asked, What about you, Miss Zimmerman? You mentioned being cast out for speaking your mind. What exactly did you say that was so unforgivable? Penelope hesitated, but something about Wade's direct gaze encouraged honesty. I spoke out against unfair business practices. I organized women to boycott a store that was charging different prices based on social standing. I wrote letters to the newspaper about the need for women to have a voice in political matters. I questioned why men like my father could make decisions that affected everyone without consulting those most impacted. Wade listened without interruption, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, Those don't sound like offenses worth losing a daughter over. My father values his reputation above all else, Penelope explained. My actions embarrassed him in front of his peers. That was unforgivable. They had reached the boarding house. Wade stopped at the bottom of the steps, turning to face her. For what it's worth, Miss Zimmerman, I think your father is a fool. Any man would be fortunate to have a daughter with your courage and conviction. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, caught Penelope by surprise. Thank you, Mr. Zane, he tipped his hat. Until Saturday, then, for your literary evening. As he walked away, Penelope found herself watching until he disappeared around the corner. Something about Wade Zane intrigued her, his straightforward manner, his quiet confidence, and the way he had stood up for her without diminishing her own strength. Saturday arrived clear and warm. Penelope spent the morning helping Martha prepare refreshments for the literary evening, simple cookies and lemonade that would be served after the readings. By mid-afternoon, she was at the schoolhouse, helping Miss Abernathy arrange chairs and display the books they hoped to purchase with the funds raised. You really think people will come? Miss Abernathy fretted, adjusting her spectacles nervously. They will, Penelope assured her with more confidence than she felt. Martha has been spreading the word all week. As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the schoolhouse windows, people began to arrive. First came families with children who attended the school, then shopkeepers and their wives, and finally, ranch hands and cowboys, looking uncomfortable in their cleaned-up clothes but curious. Penelope felt her heart lift when Wade arrived with his brothers and at least a dozen men who worked for the Double Z. He had cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a dark jacket over a crisp white shirt, his hair still damp from what must have been a recent bath. Quite a turnout, he said, approaching her with a warm smile. Looks like Silver Creek was ready for some culture after all. I'm pleased to see so many people interested, Penelope replied, suddenly aware of how her own simple blue dress brought out the color of her eyes. Thank you for bringing your men. Told them attendance was mandatory, Wade said with a wink that sent an unexpected flutter through Penelope's chest. But I think they're genuinely curious. Most of them never had much schooling. The event began with Miss Abernathy welcoming everyone and explaining the purpose of the gathering. Then Penelope stepped forward to deliver her speech about the importance of education and literature. Books are not just entertainment, she told the assembled crowd, her voice clear and passionate. They are tools for advancement. Through books, we learn new farming techniques, better ways to care for livestock, methods to improve crop yields. Through books, we discover medicines that can heal the sick and innovations that can make our lives easier. Through books, we connect with ideas and people far beyond our own experience, broadening our understanding of the world. As she spoke, Penelope was aware of Wade watching her intently from the front row, his expression one of admiration and something else she couldn't quite name. After her speech, several of Miss Abernathy's students read passages from classic literature. Then, to Penelope's surprise, Wade stood up. "If I may," he said, "I'd like to say a few words." Miss Abernathy, clearly flustered by this unexpected development, nodded her permission. Wade turned to face the crowd. "Most of you know me. You know I'm not much for speeches or fancy words, but I believe in this town and I believe in its future. That future depends on education not just for our children, but for all of us. The Double Z Ranch will be donating $50 toward new books for the school library, and I encourage every business owner and rancher here to contribute what they can." A murmur ran through the crowd. $50 was a substantial sum, enough to purchase dozens of new books. As Wade sat down, other men stood up one by one to announce their own contributions. By the end of the evening, they had raised over $200, far more than Penelope or Miss Abernathy had dared to hope for. As people began to disperse, enjoying the refreshments and chatting in small groups, Wade made his way to Penelope's side. "That was quite a speech you gave. No wonder your father found you dangerous. You have a way of making people believe in possibilities." Penelope felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you for your generous donation. It will make a real difference." "It's an investment in the future," he said simply. Then, with a slightly hesitant air that seemed at odds with his usual confidence, he added, "Miss Zimmerman, Penelope, I'd like to call on you properly, if you'd permit it." The request, so formally delivered, caught Penelope off guard. "Call on me Sunday afternoon," he clarified. "I thought perhaps we could take a ride, show you some of the country around Silver Creek." Penelope felt a smile spreading across her face. "I would like that very much, Mr. Zane." "Wade," he corrected her. "If we're going to be friends, you should call me Wade." "Wade," she repeated, liking the way the name felt on her lips. The following day, Penelope found herself nervously preparing for Wade's visit. She wore her best riding skirt and jacket, thankfully. She'd brought them with her from St. Louis and braided her dark hair into a coronet around her head. "My, don't you look fine," Martha commented with a knowing smile when Penelope came downstairs. "Riding with Wade Zane is quite the honor. He doesn't socialize much." "We're just friends," Penelope said quickly, though the flutter in her stomach suggested she might wish for more. Martha's eyebrows rose. "If you say so, dear." Wade arrived precisely at 1 o'clock, riding a magnificent black stallion and leading a gentle-looking bay mare. He had dressed in clean clothes, though he still wore his gun belt, a necessity in the territories, Penelope had learned. "Good afternoon," he greeted her, dismounting with fluid grace. "I hope you're comfortable on horseback." "I am," Penelope assured him. "My mother insisted I learn, though in St. Louis ladies ride side saddle." Wade's mouth quirked in a half smile. "Out here, practicality trumps propriety. The mare's name is Daisy. She's gentle but sure-footed." With Wade's help, Penelope mounted, grateful for the practical Western saddle that allowed her to ride astride. Together, they set off, riding at an easy pace out of town and into the rolling countryside beyond. The landscape was beautiful in its rugged way, vast expanses of grassland dotted with stands of trees, distant mountains blue on the horizon. As they rode, Wade pointed out landmarks and shared stories about the area. "That's Lookout Ridge," he said, indicating a rocky outcropping. During the war, both sides used it as a vantage point, and over there he pointed to a distant cluster of buildings. "That's the Circle B Ranch, Blackwell's place." Penelope followed his gaze, noting the contrast between the sprawling, well-maintained buildings of the Circle B and the more modest homesteads they had passed. "He seems to have prospered," she observed, Wade's expression darkened. "By any means necessary. Blackwell came here 5 years ago from back east, buying up land when prices were low after the war. Some say he doesn't always acquire property honestly." "The cattle rustling you mentioned," Wade nodded grimly. "That's part of it. He also has a habit of creating difficulties." For smaller ranchers until they're forced to sell. Mysterious fires, cattle found dead, water sources contaminated. Has no one stood against him? Penelope asked, indignant. The double Z has, Wade said. We're large enough that he can't easily intimidate us. And we've helped some of the smaller spreads when we could, but Blackwell's crafty never leaves evidence that would stand up in court. They rode in thoughtful silence for a while, then Wade steered them toward a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. I thought we might stop here for a rest. The view is worth it. He helped Penelope dismount, his strong hands at her waist sending a thrill through her that had nothing to do with the ride. They settled on a fallen log beside the creek, and Wade produced a small parcel of food from his saddlebag: bread, cheese, and apples. Not exactly a fancy St. Louis picnic, he said apologetically. It's perfect, Penelope assured him, accepting a slice of apple. This whole day has been perfect. Wade studied her for a moment, those blue eyes intent. You surprise me, Penelope Zimmerman. How so? Most women raised in comfort would be complaining about the dust, the heat, the primitive conditions, but you seem to embrace it all. Penelope considered her response carefully. I believe in focusing on what matters. Fine clothes and elegant surroundings are pleasant, but they're not essential. Freedom to speak one's mind, to make a difference, to be valued for one's thoughts rather than one's appearance or family connections, those things matter. Wade's expression softened. Your father truly was a fool to let you go. The sincerity in his voice touched Penelope deeply. For a moment they sat in companionable silence, the only sounds the bubbling of the creek and the occasional whicker of the horses. Tell me about your life before Silver Creek, Wade said eventually. What was it like growing up in St. Louis? Penelope found herself sharing stories of her childhood, her mother's gentle guidance, her father's stern expectations, her own growing awareness of the disparities and injustices in the world around her. Wade listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his genuine interest. In turn, he told her more about building the Double Z, about the challenges of raising his brothers while establishing the ranch, about his dreams for the future. I want to expand, he explained, not just in size but in operations. I've been experimenting with new breeding techniques, trying to develop cattle better suited to this climate. And I've been thinking about diversifying, perhaps adding sheep, though that's controversial in cattle country. Why controversial? Penelope asked. Cattle ranchers and sheep farmers have a long-standing feud. Sheep graze differently than cattle, cutting grass close to the ground so cattle can't feed after them. But there's good money in wool, and I believe with proper land management, both can coexist. That sounds sensible, Penelope said. Though I imagine tradition is hard to overcome, Wade's eyes crinkled at the corners. You really do understand, most people just think I'm being contrary. The sun was beginning its westward descent when they finally mounted up again for the ride back to town. As they approached the outskirts of Silver Creek, Wade suddenly reined in his horse, frowning. Smoke, he said tersely, pointing toward a plume rising from the direction of the school. Without waiting for a response, he urged his horse into a gallop, with Penelope close behind on Daisy. As they rounded the bend into town, they saw a crowd gathered around the schoolhouse, which was engulfed in flames. Wade leapt from his horse before it had fully stopped, handing the reins to a bystander. What happened? He demanded of the nearest person, a minor Penelope recognized from the boarding house. Don't rightly know, the man replied. Fire was already going strong when it was spotted. Miss Abernathy's beside herself, all them new books were inside. Penelope dismounted and pushed through the crowd until she found Miss Abernathy, who stood weeping as men formed a bucket brigade from the town well to the school. All those books, Miss Abernathy sobbed when she saw Penelope. All our hard work. Who would do such a thing? Penelope put an arm around the distraught teacher's shoulders, but her mind was racing. The timing seemed too coincidental. Just a day after their successful fundraiser, Wade appeared at her side, his face grim. Sheriff says it was deliberately set. Coal oil splashed around the building, no mistaking the intent. But who would? Penelope began, then stopped as understanding dawned. The Bartons. Could it be them? My thought exactly, Wade said grimly. Sheriff's organizing a posse to look for them, but they've likely headed back to the Circle B by now. But why? Miss Abernathy asked, bewildered. Why target the school? Wade and Penelope exchanged a knowing look. To send a message, Penelope said quietly. A warning against challenging the established order. As the fire began to die down, contained by the Bucket Brigade's efforts, but not before it had consumed most of the building, the townspeople gathered in groups, voices angry and worried. The schoolhouse had been a point of pride for Silver Creek, one of the first proper buildings erected when the town began to grow beyond its mining camp origins. Sheriff Davis, a weathered man with a gray-streaked beard, approached Wade. Found tracks heading toward the Circle B just like you thought. But without proof it was the Bartons, there's not much I can do. Can't accuse a man like Blackwell without solid evidence. Wade's jaw tightened. We know who did this, Tom, the sheriff sighed. Knowing and proving are different things, Wade. I need witnesses, evidence. Then we'll find it, Wade said firmly. As darkness fell, the crowd began to disperse, though volunteers remained to ensure the fire wouldn't reignite. Wade insisted on escorting Penelope back to the boarding house. I'm sorry our outing ended this way, he said as they walked, his expression troubled. It's not your fault, Penelope assured him. Isn't it? Wade's voice was bitter. Blackwell's been pushing, and I've been pushing back. Now he's targeting the town, and it's likely because of my opposition. Penelope stopped, turning to face him directly. This is not your responsibility, Wade Zane. If Blackwell or his men did this, the blame lies squarely with them, and if they think burning the schoolhouse will intimidate this town, they're sorely mistaken. Wade studied her face in the gathering dusk, admiration replacing the guilt in his eyes. You really aren't afraid, are you? I'm cautious, Penelope corrected him, but not afraid. Fear accomplishes nothing. A slow smile spread across Wade's face. Penelope Zimmerman, you are unlike any woman I've ever met. Before she could respond, he leaned down and kissed her a gentle, questioning kiss that nonetheless sent warmth spreading through her entire body. When he pulled back, his eyes were intense, searching hers for a response. Penelope found herself smiling up at him. I hope that means you approve of women who speak their minds, Wade laughed, a deep, genuine sound that made her heart skip. Approve? Penelope, I find it the most attractive quality you possess, and you possess many attractive qualities. The moment was interrupted by Martha calling from the boarding house porch. Penelope, Wade, is that you? Come inside and tell me what's happened. The whole town's in an uproar. With a rueful smile, Wade offered Penelope his arm. Shall we? Inside, they found not just Martha, but several of the boarders gathered in the common room, eager for news. Wade gave a concise account of what they knew, which wasn't much. What about the school children? One of the miners asked. Where will they learn now? We'll find a temporary location, Penelope said firmly, and we'll replace the books. This is a setback, not a defeat. Her confidence seemed to reassure the others. As the conversation continued, plans began to form, offers of space for temporary classrooms, promises of donations to rebuild, suggestions for increasing security around the town. It was late when the impromptu meeting finally broke up. Wade prepared to leave, but not before arranging to meet Penelope the next day to help organize the community response. I admire what you did tonight, he told her quietly at the door. You gave them hope when they needed it most. Penelope smiled, touched by his words. Good night, Wade. Good night, Penelope. Sleep well. But sleep proved elusive. Penelope lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of Wade, the fire, and what might come next. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a larger conflict, one in which she was now firmly entangled. The next morning dawned gray and cool, with clouds threatening rain. Penelope rose early, determined to begin organizing efforts to continue the children's education despite the loss of the schoolhouse. At breakfast, Martha informed her that the town council had called an emergency meeting for 10 o'clock at the church, the only building in town large enough to accommodate everyone who would want to attend. I've never seen folks so riled up, Martha said, serving coffee to her boarders. Burning the schoolhouse crossed a line. Even those who have stayed neutral in the feud with Blackwell are taking sides now. Penelope nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps that's what we needed, something to unite the town against a common threat. When she and Martha arrived at the church shortly before 10, it was already packed with townsfolk. Penelope spotted Wade near the front, deep in conversation with his brothers and Sheriff Davis. When he saw her, he made his way through the crowd to her side. "How are you this morning?" he asked, his eyes warm with concern. "Determined," Penelope replied. "This community deserves better than to be bullied by men like Blackwell." Wade's smile was approving. "Mayor's asked me to speak about what we know. Would you consider saying a few words as well?" "People were impressed by your speech at the literary evening. They'd listen to you." Penelope hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes, I'll speak." The meeting began with Mayor Johnson, a portly man with an impressive mustache, calling for order. "Friends, we're here to address yesterday's attack on our schoolhouse and to determine our course of action. Sheriff Davis will share what he knows, then we'll hear from others with relevant information." Sheriff Davis stepped forward, explaining the evidence of arson and the tracks leading toward the Circle B. "Without witnesses, however," he concluded, "we don't have enough proof for arrests." Wade spoke next, his deep voice carrying easily through the church. "We all know who's behind this. Blackwell has been trying to control this territory for years, pushing out smaller ranchers, intimidating anyone who stands against him. Now he's targeting the town itself. This isn't just about a building, it's about whether we let one man rule through fear." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Wade continued, "The Double Z is pledging lumber and labor to rebuild the schoolhouse stronger than before. And we're doubling the reward for information leading to the arrest of those responsible." Mayor Johnson thanked Wade, then said, "I understand Miss Zimmerman would like to address us as well." Penelope made her way to the front, acutely aware of all eyes upon her. Taking a deep breath, she began, "I may be new to Silver Creek, but in my short time here I've come to admire this community's resilience and spirit. Yesterday, someone tried to extinguish a light of learning in your town. They failed. The building may be gone, but the commitment to education remains." She paused, looking around at the attentive faces. "I propose we use the church as a temporary schoolroom until a new school can be built. I've already spoken with Reverend Matthews and he's willing. We need volunteers to build simple desks and benches, donations to replace the lost books, and most importantly, we need to show whoever did this that they cannot break our spirit." As she returned to her seat amid applause, Penelope caught Wade's eye. His expression of pride sent warmth spreading through her chest. The meeting continued with practical discussions about rebuilding, security measures, and fundraising. By the time it concluded, a clear plan had emerged. School would resume in the church the following Monday, a rebuilding committee had been formed, and Sheriff Davis had deputized additional men to patrol the town. As people filed out, Wade made his way to Penelope's side. "That was impressive. You have a gift for inspiring people." "I just spoke the truth," Penelope said, though she was pleased by his praise. "Sometimes that's the most powerful thing a person can do," Wade replied. He hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "I'd like to speak with you privately." "Can you meet me at Martha's in an hour?" Curiosity piqued, Penelope agreed. After helping Martha distribute leftover refreshments from the meeting, she returned to the boarding house to wait for Wade. He arrived exactly an hour later, his expression serious. Martha, with a knowing smile, showed him into the small parlor, then discreetly withdrew, leaving the door open a respectable crack. "What's troubling you, Wade?" Penelope asked once they were seated. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I'm concerned about your safety. Blackwell isn't known for half measures. If he sees you as a threat and after today's speech, you could be in danger." Penelope felt a chill at his words but kept her voice steady. "What are you suggesting, that I stop speaking out, hide away?" "No," Wade said firmly, "never that. Your voice is too important." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Penelope had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "I'm suggesting you stay at the Double Z for a while. We've got plenty of room and it's more defensible than the boarding house. The proposal caught Penelope by surprise. Stay at your ranch, that would be inappropriate. Wade's mouth quirked in a half smile. Martha would come too as your chaperone. I've already discussed it with her and she's willing. You discussed this with Martha before speaking to me? Penelope asked, a touch of indignation in her voice. I wanted to ensure it was a proper arrangement before suggesting it to you, Wade explained. I would never do anything to compromise your reputation, Penelope. His consideration touched her, tempering her initial reaction, and Martha agreed. Wade nodded. She's concerned for your safety as well. The boarding house is in town, easily accessible. The Double Z is more isolated with men on guard day and night. Penelope considered the proposal. The idea of staying at Wade's ranch was both thrilling and intimidating. She would be under his roof, seeing him daily, learning more about his life and work. But she also valued her independence, hard-won after leaving her father's house. I appreciate your concern, she said carefully, but I won't be driven away by fear. If I leave town, Blackwell wins. Wade leaned closer, his eyes intense. Not if you use the time to build a stronger opposition. At the ranch, you'd have access to my library books on law, land management, territorial regulations, knowledge we could use against Blackwell legally. His mention of a library caught Penelope's interest. You have a library? A smile spread across Wade's face as if he knew he'd found her weakness. My father believed in education. I've continued collecting books over the years. Not as extensive as what you might be used to in St. Louis, but substantial for these parts. Penelope found her resistance wavering. The prospect of access to books, combined with the chance to work directly with Wade against Blackwell's influence, was tempting. And if she was honest with herself, the idea of spending more time with Wade himself was equally appealing. If Martha truly is willing to accompany me, she said slowly, then I accept your offer, temporarily. The relief in Wade's expression was palpable. Thank you. We can leave tomorrow morning if that suits you. They spent the next half hour discussing practical arrangements. Wade would send a wagon for their belongings in the morning, and his brother Morgan would escort them to the ranch, while Wade remained in town to work with the sheriff. As Wade prepared to leave, he paused at the parlor door. Penelope, there's something else I want to say. She looked up at him expectantly. When you first told me about being cast out for speaking your mind, I thought to myself that any man would be a fool to silence a woman with your intelligence and conviction. His eyes held hers, intense and sincere. I want you to know that with me, you should always speak your mind. I value your thoughts, your opinions, your voice even when we disagree, perhaps especially then. The declaration, so simply stated yet so profound, touched Penelope deeply. In a society where women were often expected to be decorative and agreeable, Wade's explicit valuing of her mind was revolutionary. Thank you, she said softly. That means more than you know, he nodded, understanding in his eyes. Until tomorrow, then. After he left, Penelope found Martha in the kitchen, pretending to be busy with dinner preparations but clearly waiting to hear about their conversation. So, you'll be coming to the Double Z with me? Penelope asked, taking a seat at the kitchen table. Martha smiled knowingly. Seems the sensible thing to do. Besides, I've known the Zane family for years. Wade was just a boy when they first came to these parts. He's grown into a good man, one of the best. I'm beginning to see that, Penelope admitted. Beginning? Martha chuckled. Girl, I've seen how you look at him. And more importantly, I've seen how he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. Penelope felt her cheeks warm. It's too soon for such thoughts. We've only just met. Time moves differently out here, Martha said wisely. People show their true selves quicker when facing hardship and danger together. You learn more about a person in a week of trouble than in a year of easy times. As Penelope helped Martha prepare dinner, her mind was filled with thoughts of Wade and what the coming days might bring. She was stepping into unknown territory in more ways than one, but for perhaps the first time in her life, uncertainty felt exhilarating rather than frightening. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a welcome change from the previous day's heat. Penelope packed her few belongings with care, making sure her journal and writing materials were easily accessible. Whatever came next, she intended to document it thoroughly. The wagon arrived shortly after breakfast, driven by Wade Zane. Unlike his older brother's serious demeanor, Morgan had an easy smile and a relaxed manner. "Ladies," he greeted them with a tip of his hat, "your carriage awaits. Not exactly a fine coach, but the horses are steady and the seats are padded." Martha laughed as she handed him her well-worn carpetbag. "I've ridden in worse, young man. Just be sure those chickens in the back don't get any ideas about roosting in my good bonnet." Indeed, the wagon contained not only supplies for the ranch, but also a crate of chickens and what appeared to be a young goat tied to the back. "Ranch business," Morgan explained with a grin when he saw Penelope's questioning look. "Wade's always bringing home strays of one kind or another." As they settled onto the wagon bench, with Martha between Penelope and Morgan as propriety dictated, Penelope found herself both nervous and excited about what lay ahead. The wagon pulled away from the boarding house, attracting curious glances from townspeople going about their morning business. "Word travels fast in small towns," Martha murmured. "By noon, everyone will know you're staying at the Double Z." "Will it cause talk?" Penelope asked, suddenly concerned about her reputation. Martha patted her hand reassuringly. "With me along as chaperone, no more than a modest amount. Besides, folks around here respect Wade Zane. If he's offering protection, they'll understand why you'd accept." The journey to the Double Z took just over 2 hours, the wagon following a well-traveled road that wound through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of cottonwood and pine. As they crested a final hill, the ranch spread out before them, a collection of solid buildings nestled in a valley, with corrals, barns, and bunkhouses arranged around a central 2-story house built of logs and stone. "Home sweet home," Morgan announced proudly. "Not fancy, but comfortable." Penelope was impressed by the scale and orderliness of the operation. Men were working in the corrals, horses grazed in nearby pastures, and smoke rose from several chimneys, suggesting a level of civilization she hadn't expected. As the wagon pulled into the yard, the front door of the main house opened, and a young woman stepped out, petite, with honey blonde hair and a welcoming smile. This, Penelope realized with surprise, was not something Wade had mentioned. "Morgan, you're back." The young woman called, hurrying toward them. "And you must be Miss Zimmerman and Mrs. Wilson. I'm Sophie Grant, the housekeeper. Wade sent word you'd be arriving today." Morgan jumped down from the wagon and helped first Martha, then Penelope to dismount. "Sophie keeps us all in line," he explained with a grin. "Don't know what we'd do without her." Sophie blushed slightly at the praise but maintained her professional demeanor. "I've prepared rooms for both of you on the second floor. If you'll follow me, I'll show you where you'll be staying." As they followed Sophie into the house, Penelope took in her surroundings with interest. The interior was unexpectedly refined, polished wooden floors covered with woven rugs, solid furniture that showed signs of care, and walls adorned with paintings of Western landscapes. It was a masculine space, certainly, but one that reflected taste and appreciation for beauty. "Wade's mother had a good eye," Martha commented, noticing Penelope's surprise. She made sure this place was a home, not just a house. After she passed, Wade kept it up in her memory. Sophie led them upstairs to adjacent bedrooms, each comfortably furnished with a bed, dresser, washstand, and chair. "The washroom is at the end of the hall," she explained. "Hot water is available in the mornings and evenings. Meals are at 6, noon, and 6 again in the dining room downstairs." "Is there anything else you ladies need right away?" "This is lovely, thank you," Penelope said sincerely. "Mr. Zane mentioned a library," Sophie's face brightened. "Yes, it's Wade's pride and joy apart from the ranch itself. Downstairs, last door on the left. You're welcome to use it anytime." After Sophie left them to settle in, Martha raised an eyebrow at Penelope. "The library, is it? Not wasting any time, I see." Penelope felt herself blush. "Wade suggested I research territorial law while we're here. It might help us build a case against Blackwell." Martha hummed skeptically. Well, I'm going to rest these old bones for a bit before lunch. You go on and explore if you like. Alone in her room, Penelope unpacked her few belongings, then decided to take Sophie up on her invitation to visit the library. Making her way downstairs, she found the door Sophie had indicated and opened it tentatively. The room beyond took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls filled with leather-bound volumes. A large desk occupied one corner, papers neatly stacked upon it. 2 comfortable leather chairs flanked a stone fireplace with a small table between them. Large windows allowed natural light to flood the space, illuminating the colorful spines of the books. It's not the St. Louis Public Library, but it serves our needs. Penelope turned to find Wade Zane, the youngest brother, watching her from the doorway with an amused expression. "It's wonderful," she said honestly. "I wouldn't have expected such a collection out here." Caleb entered the room, running a hand along one of the shelves affectionately. "Our father started it, said a man needed to exercise his mind as well as his body. Wade's added to it over the years, especially the sections on agriculture, animal husbandry, and law." "He mentioned books on territorial regulations," Penelope asked. "Over here." Caleb led her to a section of shelves near the desk. Everything from land grants to water rights, Wade's become something of an expert had to, dealing with Blackwell's legal maneuvers. Penelope examined the titles with interest. "This is exactly what I was hoping to find. Thank you, Caleb." He grinned, looking boyish despite being in his early 20s. "Just don't get too absorbed and miss lunch. Sophie takes offense if people aren't prompt for meals and you don't want to get on her bad side." After Caleb left, Penelope selected several volumes on territorial law and settled into one of the leather chairs. Soon she was deeply engrossed, making notes on a pad of paper she found in the desk drawer. The legal language was complex but not impenetrable to someone with her education. She was still reading when Sophie appeared at the door to announce lunch. In the dining room, Penelope found Martha already seated, chatting comfortably with Morgan and Caleb. The meal was simple but well-prepared: beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. "Wade should be back by sundown," Morgan informed them as they ate. "Said to tell you the sheriff's organized extra patrols around town, and the rebuilding committee is meeting tomorrow to draw up plans for the new schoolhouse." "That's encouraging," Penelope said. "What about the temporary school in the church? Has that been arranged?" Caleb nodded. "Miss Abernathy's there now, setting things up with some of the mothers. Classes will start Monday as planned." The conversation flowed easily, touching on ranch business, town gossip, and the ongoing situation with Blackwell. Penelope was struck by how naturally the Zane brothers included her and Martha, seeking their opinions and listening attentively to their responses. After lunch, Penelope returned to the library, determined to find legal leverage against Blackwell. Hours passed as she pored over statutes and precedents, building a clearer picture of land rights in the territory. The sound of horses in the yard eventually pulled her from her studies. Looking out the window, she saw Wade dismounting from his black stallion, speaking with one of the ranch hands as he handed over the reins. Even from a distance, she could see the weariness in the set of his shoulders. Minutes later, the library door opened and Wade stood there, hat in hand, his face lighting up at the sight of her. "I see you found your way to the books," he said, his voice warm with approval. Penelope rose, suddenly aware of the flutter in her stomach at his presence. "Yes, Caleb showed me where to find the legal texts. I've been reading about water rights and boundary disputes." Wade crossed to the desk, glancing at her notes. "Find anything useful?" "Possibly," Penelope said, moving to stand beside him. "There's a clause in the territorial statutes about malicious interference with community resources. If we can prove Blackwell was behind the schoolhouse fire, it would fall under that jurisdiction." Wade looked impressed. "I've read those statutes a dozen times and missed that connection." "Sometimes a fresh perspective helps," Penelope said modestly. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "That's exactly why your voice matters, Penelope. You see things differently, you make connections others miss." He hesitated, then added, "I'm glad you're here." The sincerity in his voice made Penelope's heart race. So am I. For a moment they stood close, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Then Wade cleared his throat and stepped back slightly. I should clean up before dinner. Sophie has strict rules about trail dust at her table. Of course, Penelope said, gathering her notes. I'll see you at dinner. As Wade left, Penelope found herself smiling. Despite the circumstances that had brought her to the Double Z, she couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt toward Wade Zane, a man who valued her mind as much as her company. Dinner that evening was a lively affair, with all three Zane brothers present, along with Martha, Penelope, and to Penelope's surprise, Sheriff Davis, who had ridden out from town with news. Caught one of the Barton brothers, he announced as they sat down to a meal of roast chicken and vegetables. Clyde, the oldest, he was drunk at the saloon, bragging about watching the schoolhouse burn. Wade's expression was grim but satisfied. Did he implicate Blackwell? The sheriff shook his head. Not directly, said they were following orders but wouldn't say whose. Still, it's a start. I've got him locked up in town. What about the other brothers? Penelope asked. Lit out for the Circle B as soon as Clyde was arrested, Sheriff Davis replied. Blackwell's probably hiding them there. The conversation turned to security measures for the town and the ongoing investigation. Penelope listened intently, occasionally offering suggestions based on her reading of the law. After dinner, the men retired to the porch with coffee, while Martha excused herself to rest. Penelope hesitated, then joined the men outside, drawn by the ongoing discussion of strategy against Blackwell. Wade immediately made space for her on the porch swing, a simple gesture that nonetheless felt significant. I was just telling Tom about your findings on community resources, he said as she sat beside him. Sheriff Davis nodded thoughtfully. It's a solid angle, Miss Zimmerman. If we can prove Blackwell ordered the fire, we might finally have something that will stick. The challenge is proof, Penelope pointed out. Without direct evidence linking Blackwell to the orders, it's still just suspicion. What we need, Wade said slowly, is someone on the inside. Someone who knows Blackwell's operations and is willing to talk. Morgan leaned forward in his chair. There's that new hand he hired last month, used to work for the Simmons place before Blackwell forced them out. He didn't seem happy about the change. Jimmy Carter, the sheriff supplied. Young fellow, maybe 20. Has a sweetheart in town, Sally, who works at the diner. Might be an angle there. Penelope's mind raced with possibilities. What if I spoke with Sally, woman to woman? If Jimmy's unhappy working for Blackwell, she might be able to convince him to come forward with information. The men exchanged glances, and Penelope braced herself for dismissal of her idea. Instead, Wade nodded slowly. That could work. Sally might talk more freely with you than with any of us. Worth a try, Sheriff Davis agreed, but it would mean going back into town, which is risky right now. I'll go with her, Wade said firmly. We can use the pretense of checking on the temporary schoolroom. Plans were made for a trip to town the following day. As the evening wore on, Sheriff Davis departed, and Morgan and Caleb drifted away to their own pursuits, leaving Wade and Penelope alone on the porch. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. The rhythmic motion of the swing was soothing, and Penelope found herself relaxing despite the weight of all they had discussed. Thank you, Wade said finally, his voice soft in the gathering dusk. For what? For bringing new hope to this fight. For using your mind and voice in service of justice. He turned slightly to face her, his expression earnest in the lantern light. I've been battling Blackwell for years, sometimes feeling like I was the only one who saw the danger he represented. Now, with you here. You're not alone, Penelope finished for him, understanding completely. Wade reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle as they enclosed hers. No, I'm not, and neither are you, Penelope, not anymore. The simple touch, the quiet words, carried more meaning than grand declarations might have. Penelope felt something shift between them, a deepening of connection, a recognition of shared purpose that went beyond mere attraction. In St. Louis, she said softly, I often felt alone even in crowded rooms. No one seemed to understand why I couldn't simply accept things as they were, why I had to question, to challenge. "And here?" Wade asked, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. Penelope smiled in the darkness. "Here I've found people who value truth over comfort, who fight for what's right even when it's difficult, who listen when I speak." "Always," Wade promised, his voice low and intense. "I will always listen when you speak, Penelope. Your words matter to me." The declaration, simple yet profound, touched something deep within her. In a society that too often silenced women, Wade's explicit valuing of her voice was revolutionary. As they sat together in the gathering darkness, hands joined, Penelope felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Wade beside her, both of them stronger together than apart. The next morning, Penelope dressed with care for their trip to town, selecting a practical but becoming blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. As she pinned up her hair, she considered her approach to Sally, the diner waitress. Direct questioning might seem threatening, but a woman-to-woman conversation about protecting a loved one might yield better results. At breakfast, Wade outlined the day's plan. "We'll leave in an hour, visit the temporary school first, then stop at the diner for lunch. That should give you a natural opportunity to speak with Sally." "What if Blackwell's men are watching the town?" Martha asked, concern evident in her voice. "That's why I'll be with Penelope the entire time," Wade assured her, "and Morgan's riding in separately, keeping an eye out for trouble." The ride to Silver Creek was pleasant, despite the serious nature of their mission. Wade had provided a proper saddle horse for Penelope rather than having her ride in the wagon, and she appreciated both his recognition of her riding abilities and the freedom it gave her. As they rode side by side, conversation flowed easily between them. Wade shared stories of building the ranch, of challenges overcome and lessons learned. In turn, Penelope spoke of her education, her growing awareness of social injustices, and her hopes for a more equitable future. "You would have gotten along well with my mother," Wade said at one point. "She was educated back east before marrying my father, always had a book in hand and strong opinions on how things should be." "Tell me more about her," Penelope encouraged, touched by the softening of his expression when he spoke of his mother. "She was beautiful," Wade said, his voice tinged with old grief. "Not just in appearance, though she was that too, but in spirit. She believed in the goodness of people while being clear-eyed about their failings. Taught us boys to read and write before we ever saw the inside of a schoolhouse, made sure we knew that strength wasn't just in our muscles but in our minds and hearts." "She sounds remarkable," Penelope said softly. Wade nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "She was. The typhoid took her and my father within days of each other. I was 20, suddenly responsible for my brothers and the ranch. There were times I didn't think I could do it, but then I'd remember what she would have expected of me, and somehow I found the strength to continue." The vulnerability in his admission touched Penelope deeply. This strong, capable man had faced profound loss and responsibility at a young age, yet had emerged not hardened but tempered by the experience. As they approached Silver Creek, Wade guided them toward the church first. Inside, they found Miss Abernathy directing volunteers in arranging simple benches and desks. "Mr. Zane, Miss Zimmerman," she greeted them warmly. "How wonderful to see you both. We're making good progress, as you can see." Indeed, the church nave had been transformed into a functional classroom, with a blackboard mounted at the front and rows of makeshift desks arranged facing it. "It looks excellent," Penelope said sincerely. "The children will be able to continue their education without interruption." "Thanks in large part to your quick organizing," Miss Abernathy said, "and Mr. Zane's generous donation of lumber for the desks." They spent an hour helping with final arrangements, then made their way to the diner for lunch as planned. The small establishment was busy with the midday crowd, and they took a table near the back where they could observe the room while having some privacy for conversation. Sally, a pretty young woman with auburn hair, approached to take their order. "Mr. Zane," she greeted him with a smile, then looked curiously at Penelope. "Sally, this is Miss Zimmerman," Wade introduced them. "She's staying at the Double Z for a while, helping with some research." Pleased to meet you, Miss Zimmerman, Sally said. What can I get you folks today? After placing their orders, Wade excused himself to speak with Sheriff Davis, who had just entered the diner, leaving Penelope alone at the table as they had planned. When Sally returned with coffee, Penelope smiled warmly. Thank you. It's Sally, isn't it? Martha Wilson at the boarding house has mentioned you says you make the best apple pie in the county. Sally blushed with pleasure. That's kind of her to say. You're staying out at the Double Z now. Yes, temporarily, Penelope confirmed. Mr. Zane thought it might be safer after what happened to the schoolhouse. Sally's expression grew troubled. Awful business that. Everyone knows who did it, but proving it. It's difficult, Penelope agreed, then lowered her voice. Sally, I understand your young man works at the Circle B. The waitress stiffened slightly. Jimmy? Yes, but he's not involved in anything wrong. I'm sure he isn't, Penelope said quickly. In fact, that's why I wanted to speak with you. Jimmy might be in a position to help stop Blackwell before something worse happens. Sally glanced around nervously. I don't know what you mean. I think you do, Penelope said gently. Jimmy must see things, hear things while working there. If he's uncomfortable with what's happening, he might consider speaking with Sheriff Davis. That would be dangerous, Sally whispered. Mr. Blackwell doesn't tolerate disloyalty. Which is precisely why he must be stopped, Penelope urged. What happens next time he decides to send a message? What if someone is hurt or worse? Would Jimmy be able to live with himself if he could have prevented it but didn't speak up? Sally bit her lip, clearly torn. Jimmy's been talking about leaving, finding work elsewhere. He says things are bad at the Circle B, getting worse. Sheriff Davis could protect him, Penelope suggested, and I know Mr. Zane would offer him a job at the Double Z. I'll talk to him, Sally promised hesitantly. He's coming to town tomorrow evening to see me. Thank you, Penelope said sincerely. That's all I ask. Their conversation was interrupted by Wade's return to the table. He raised a questioning eyebrow at Penelope, who gave him a small nod to indicate success. As they finished their meal and prepared to leave town, Penelope couldn't help noticing the increased tension in Wade's demeanor. What is it? She asked as they mounted their horses. Did Sheriff Davis have news? Wade's expression was grim. Blackwell's in town at the bank right now, and he knows you're staying at the Double Z. Penelope felt a chill at his words. How? Small town, Wade said simply. News travels. Davis thinks we should head back to the ranch right away, avoid any confrontation. As they rode down the main street toward the edge of town, a man stepped out of the bank tall, expensively dressed, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His cold eyes fixed on them as they passed. Zane, he called out, his voice cultured but carrying an undercurrent of menace. Wade reined in his horse, signaling for Penelope to do the same. Blackwell. Edward Blackwell approached, his gaze shifting to Penelope with calculating interest. I don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting your companion. Miss Penelope Zimmerman, Wade said, his tone clipped. Penelope, Edward Blackwell. Blackwell swept off his hat in an exaggerated gesture of politeness. Miss Zimmerman, I understand you're quite the advocate for education. Such a shame about the schoolhouse, terrible accident. It was no accident, Penelope replied evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. It was arson committed by men following orders, men who will face justice. Blackwell's eyes hardened, though his smile remained fixed. Bold words from a newcomer. You should be careful, Miss Zimmerman. The West can be dangerous for those who don't understand its particular rules. Are you threatening Miss Zimmerman? Wade asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Merely offering friendly advice, Blackwell said smoothly. Silver Creek has certain ways of doing things. Those who disrupt the natural order often find themselves unwelcome. The natural order, Penelope couldn't contain her indignation, is burning a schoolhouse part of this natural order you speak of. Penelope, Wade cautioned, but she was too angry to heed his warning. Let me be clear, Mr. Blackwell, she continued. If you think intimidation will silence those who stand for justice, you are gravely mistaken. This community deserves better than to live under the shadow of fear you've cast. Blackwell's facade of civility slipped slightly, revealing a glimpse of cold fury beneath. You would do well to remember that you are a guest here, Miss Zimmerman. Guests who overstay their welcome often find themselves asked to leave one way or another. That's enough, Wade said firmly, moving his horse between Penelope and Blackwell. We'll be on our way now. Come, Penelope. As they rode out of town, Penelope's heart was pounding, both from the confrontation and from the undisguised threat in Blackwell's words. I'm sorry, she said once they were clear of the town. I shouldn't have engaged with him. To her surprise, Wade didn't look angry. Instead, his expression held a mixture of concern and admiration. You spoke the truth, Penelope. I can't fault you for that. But Blackwell is dangerous more so than you realize. He's not accustomed to being challenged, especially not by a woman. All the more reason someone should challenge him, Penelope insisted. Wade smiled slightly, shaking his head. You truly are fearless, aren't you? Then more seriously, but I am concerned that confrontation will have consequences. We were already opposing him, Penelope pointed out. How much worse can it get? Blackwell plays the long game, Wade explained. He'll look for vulnerabilities, ways to hurt those who stand against him. And now he's identified you as a specific target. The thought was sobering, but Penelope refused to be cowed. Then we must move more quickly. Sally said Jimmy, her young man who works for Blackwell, will be in town tomorrow evening. If he's willing to talk, we might finally get the evidence we need. Wade nodded thoughtfully. I'll speak with Davis, arrange a private meeting, but after today we need to be even more careful. No more trips to town for you until this is resolved. Though part of her wanted to argue, Penelope recognized the wisdom in his caution. Very well. But I won't hide away entirely. There's still research to be done, strategies to develop. I wouldn't expect anything less, Wade said, his expression softening as he looked at her. Your determination is one of the things I most admire about you, Penelope. The simple compliment warmed her more than she cared to admit. As they continued toward the Double Z, she found herself reflecting on how quickly Wade had become important to her, his respect for her mind, his unwavering support of her voice, his quiet strength that never sought to diminish her own. Back at the ranch, they found Morgan already returned and conferring with several ranch hands near the corral. He approached as they dismounted, his expression serious. Riders spotted near the north boundary, he reported. 3 men keeping their distance but definitely watching the ranch. Wade's jaw tightened. Blackwell's not wasting any time. Double the guards tonight and make sure everyone's armed. Penelope felt a chill at his words. Do you think he'd actually attack the ranch? Not directly, Wade said grimly. But harassment, rustling, maybe firing a few shots in the night to keep us on edge, those are his usual tactics. As they entered the house, Martha looked up from her knitting, immediately sensing the tension. What happened? Penelope explained their confrontation with Blackwell while Wade went to check on security arrangements. Martha listened with growing concern. The man's a snake, she said when Penelope finished. But confronting him publicly, that was risky, girl. I know, Penelope admitted. But I couldn't stand by while he made veiled threats and pretended innocence. Martha shook her head, though there was a hint of pride in her expression. You remind me of myself at your age, never could keep quiet when I saw something wrong. She set aside her knitting. Well, what's done is done. Now we prepare for whatever comes next. The rest of the day passed in a state of heightened alertness. Wade and his brothers reviewed security measures, ensuring all hands knew to report any unusual activity immediately. Penelope returned to the library, determined to find additional legal leverage they could use against Blackwell. By evening, a tense quiet had settled over the ranch. Dinner was a subdued affair, with conversation focused on practical matters of security and plans for the following day. After the meal, Wade asked Penelope to join him in the library. There, he spread out a map of the area on his desk. I want you to familiarize yourself with the ranch layout, he explained, just in case. Together, they went over escape routes, hiding places, and rallying points. The exercise was sobering, making the threat feel more real, but Penelope appreciated Wade's practical approach to her safety. I've arranged for one of the hands to escort Morgan to town tomorrow, Wade said as they finished. He'll meet with Jimmy if the young man is willing to talk. In the meantime, I need to stay here to oversee security. And I'll continue my research, Penelope added. There must be some legal precedent we can use if Jimmy's testimony isn't enough. Wade studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "You're remarkable, Penelope." Most people would be frightened, looking for a way to escape the situation, but you're still thinking of how to fight back. Fear accomplishes nothing, Penelope said simply. Action does. Then speak your mind with me always, Wade said, echoing his earlier words but with new meaning. Your thoughts, your insights, they're valuable. I've spent years fighting Blackwell with little progress. Perhaps your fresh perspective is exactly what we need. The sincerity in his voice touched Penelope deeply. In that moment, she realized that her feelings for Wade had grown far beyond mere attraction or admiration. She was falling in love with this man who valued her mind, who encouraged her voice, who saw her strength as an asset rather than a threat. "I will," she promised softly. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Caleb entered, his expression troubled. "Wade, one of the hands just rode in from the south pasture, says he found 2 of our cattle dead shot, not butchered." Wade's face hardened. "Blackwell's message, he's telling us he can get to what we value." "What should we do?" Caleb asked. "Double the night watch," Wade decided. "And bring the herd closer to the ranch house for now. It's not ideal for grazing, but it's more defensible." After Caleb left, Wade turned back to Penelope, concern evident in his eyes. "This is escalating quickly. Blackwell usually moves more subtly. Your confrontation today must have struck a nerve. Or he was already planning to increase pressure, and this is just convenient timing," Penelope suggested. "Either way, it only underscores the importance of stopping him." Wade nodded grimly. "Get some rest, Penelope. Tomorrow may bring challenges we can't yet anticipate." Sleep proved elusive that night. Penelope lay awake, listening to the occasional movement of guards outside, her mind racing with possibilities and concerns. When she finally drifted off near dawn, her dreams were troubled by images of fire and shadowy figures. She awoke to the sound of urgent voices. Dressing quickly, she hurried downstairs to find Wade and Morgan in intense conversation in the front hall. "What's happened?" she asked, noting their grave expressions. Wade turned to her, his face grim. "Jimmy Carter was found dead this morning behind the livery stable, shot in the back." The news hit Penelope like a physical blow. Sally, she must be devastated, and the information he might have provided. "Gone," Morgan confirmed bleakly. "Sheriff Davis is calling it murder, openly accusing Blackwell but without evidence." "There has to be something," Penelope insisted. "People don't just kill with impunity, even in the territories." "They do if they have enough power," Wade said bitterly. "Blackwell's bought judges before, intimidated witnesses. Without solid evidence linking him directly to the order, he'll claim it was a random robbery or a personal dispute." Penelope's mind raced. What about Sally? Would she be willing to testify about what Jimmy told her? Even secondhand information might help build a case. "She's too frightened," Morgan reported. "After finding Jimmy, she packed her things and took the morning stage east. Can't say I blame her." The news was disheartening, but Penelope refused to give up. "Then we need another approach." "What about financial records? If Blackwell is involved in illegal activities, there might be evidence in his business dealings." Wade looked thoughtful. "The bank president, Harrison, has always seemed uncomfortable with Blackwell's influence. He might be willing to help discreetly." "It's worth exploring," Penelope agreed. "And what about the territorial governor? Could we appeal directly to higher authority?" "Possibly," Wade said, his expression lightening slightly. "Governor Collins is known for his stance against corruption, if we could get an audience with him." Their planning was interrupted by Sophie, who appeared in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Mr. Wade, there's a rider coming fast from town. Looks like it might be Sheriff Davis." Wade moved quickly to the door, Penelope and Morgan following. Indeed, the approaching rider was the sheriff, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Tom, what's happened?" Wade called as the sheriff dismounted. Sheriff Davis's face was grave. "Blackwell's made his move. He's filed legal papers claiming the Double Z is partially on his land, based on some old survey he's suddenly produced. He's demanding you vacate the disputed portion immediately, which just happens to include your best water source." Wade's expression darkened. That's absurd. We have clear title to every acre of this ranch. I know that, the sheriff said, but he's got a judge from the next county coming to hear the case, Judge Pearson, who's known to be in Blackwell's pocket. When? Wade demanded. Day after tomorrow, Davis replied, and there's more. He's accusing you of harboring a dangerous agitator, he nodded toward Penelope, who he claims is inciting violence against legitimate business interests. Penelope felt cold anger rising within her. That's ridiculous. I've advocated for justice, not violence. You and I know that, the sheriff said grimly, but Blackwell's spinning a tale of an outside troublemaker stirring up the community against him. Given recent events, the schoolhouse, Jimmy's murder, he's painting himself as the victim. Wade's jaw clenched. We'll fight this, Tom. In court and out of it if necessary. I figured you'd say that, the sheriff sighed. That's why I rode out myself instead of sending a deputy, wanted to warn you to be prepared. Blackwell won't stop at legal maneuvers. After the sheriff departed, Wade called a meeting of his brothers and senior ranch hands. Penelope and Martha were included, a gesture that spoke volumes about Wade's respect for their input. We're facing a two-pronged attack, Wade explained to the assembled group. Legal and potentially physical. We need to prepare for both. Plans were made quickly and efficiently, securing the ranch's water source with armed guards, gathering documentation to refute Blackwell's land claims, and establishing a defense perimeter around the ranch buildings. What about the legal hearing? Penelope asked. If the judge is biased, we need overwhelming evidence. I've sent Caleb to fetch our lawyer from Junction City, Wade said. He should arrive by morning. In the meantime, you and I need to review all our property documents. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Penelope worked alongside Wade in the library, combing through dusty deed books and survey maps, building a case against Blackwell's fraudulent claim. The work was detailed and sometimes tedious, but the shared purpose created a bond between them that transcended mere collaboration. As evening approached, Wade finally sat back, rubbing his tired eyes. I think we have enough to challenge his claim, even with a biased judge. The original survey is clear, and we have affidavits from the previous owners confirming the boundaries. What if it's not enough? Penelope asked quietly. What if the judge rules against you regardless of evidence? Wade's expression was resolute. Then we appeal to the territorial court. And in the meantime, we defend what's ours. The implications of his words hung in the air, between them the possibility of armed conflict, of bloodshed. Penelope felt a chill at the thought. There has to be another way, she said. Violence will only lead to more violence. I agree, Wade said, surprising her. Which is why we need to find Blackwell's weakness, something that will force him to back down without a fight. Penelope considered this. Every man has a vulnerability. For some it's money, for others reputation, for others still it's a secret they don't want revealed. What drives Blackwell? What does he truly value? Power, Wade said immediately. Everything he does is about increasing his control, his influence. Then perhaps that's where we strike, Penelope suggested. If we could demonstrate that opposing you weakens rather than strengthens his position. Their conversation was interrupted by Morgan, who burst into the library with urgent news. Riders approaching from the east. At least a dozen, moving fast. Wade was on his feet instantly. Get everyone in position. No one fires unless fired upon, understood? As Morgan rushed to relay the orders, Wade turned to Penelope. Stay inside with Martha and Sophie. If shooting starts, go to the root cellar, it's the safest place. Penelope wanted to protest, but recognized this was no time for arguments. Be careful, Wade. His expression softened briefly. Always. Then he was gone, striding purposefully toward the gun cabinet in the hall. From the parlor window, Penelope watched as Wade and his men took up defensive positions around the ranch house and outbuildings. The approaching riders slowed as they neared, stopping just beyond rifle range. One man rode forward alone, Blackwell himself, immediately recognizable even at a distance. Wade walked out to meet him, stopping halfway between the house and the waiting riders. Though she couldn't hear their exchange, Penelope could see the tension in Wade's posture, the arrogant confidence in Blackwell's. After several minutes, Blackwell turned his horse and rode back to his men. The group withdrew slowly, maintaining a threatening presence even as they departed. When Wade returned to the house, his expression was grim but controlled. Blackwell came to deliver his message in person, says if we don't vacate the disputed land by morning, his men will remove us by force. He's trying to provoke a confrontation before the legal hearing, Penelope realized. If violence breaks out, he can claim self-defense or paint you as the aggressor. Exactly, Wade agreed, which is why we won't give him what he wants. We'll maintain our positions, defend if attacked, but not initiate violence. As night fell, the ranch settled into an uneasy vigilance. Men took turns standing watch while others rested. Penelope found sleep impossible, her mind racing with concern for Wade and everyone at the Double Z. Near midnight, unable to remain inactive any longer, she made her way downstairs to the kitchen, thinking to make coffee for the men on watch. She found Wade already there, sitting alone at the table with a cup of coffee and a worried expression. "You should be resting," he said when he saw her, though his tone held no reproach. "I could say the same to you," Penelope replied, taking the seat across from him. "Have there been any developments?" Wade shook his head. "Blackwell's men are camped just beyond our eastern boundary. Waiting for morning, I expect. Do you think they'll actually attack?" "It depends on how desperate Blackwell is," Wade said thoughtfully. "A frontal assault on a defended ranch would be risky, potentially deadly, but if he believes his position is threatened enough." They sat in companionable silence for a while, sharing the quiet darkness of the kitchen. Finally, Wade spoke again, his voice soft with emotion. "I want you to know, Penelope, that whatever happens tomorrow, these past weeks knowing you have been the most meaningful of my life." The simple declaration caught her by surprise, though her heart had recognized the truth of it before her mind. "Wade." He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "You came to Silver Creek because you were cast out for speaking your mind. But here, you found a place where your voice matters, where your thoughts are valued. I want you to know that with me, you should always speak your mind freely. I cherish your opinions, your insights, your courage even when we disagree." Penelope felt tears prickling behind her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "No one has ever valued my mind the way you do. My entire life I've been told that a woman's opinions are secondary, that my role was to be decorative and agreeable, but you listen, you consider, you respect. Because you deserve that respect," Wade said simply. "Your intelligence, your conviction, your willingness to stand for what's right, these are rare qualities in anyone, man or woman." In that moment, with danger looming and the future uncertain, Penelope recognized the depth of her feelings for this remarkable man. "I love you, Wade Zane," she said softly, the words flowing naturally from her heart. "Not despite the challenges we face, but partly because of how you face them with integrity, courage, and compassion." Wade's eyes widened slightly, then softened with emotion. He rose from his chair, circling the table to kneel beside her. "Penelope Zimmerman, I love you too. I think I have since that first day when you looked me in the eye without flinching and spoke your mind without fear." Their first real kiss was gentle, a tender expression of feelings too profound for words alone. When they finally parted, Wade rested his forehead against hers, his voice barely above a whisper. "When this is over, when Blackwell is no longer a threat, I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." "Yes," Penelope replied without hesitation. 1,000 times yes." The moment of joy was interrupted by the sound of a rider approaching at speed. Wade was instantly alert, moving to the window to peer into the darkness. "It's one of our men, Ben, from the south boundary." He strode quickly to the door, Penelope following. The rider dismounted in a rush, his face urgent in the lantern light. "Mr. Zane, Blackwell's men are setting fire to the south pasture, the wind's pushing it toward the ranch." Wade's expression hardened. "Get everyone up. We need to cut fire breaks before it reaches the buildings." He turned to Penelope. "This is his real play. While we're fighting the fire, he'll move on the water source." Understanding dawned. "It's a diversion." "Exactly. Wade was already moving, calling out orders to the men who were emerging from the bunkhouse. Morgan. Take half the men to fight the fire. Caleb, you and the rest hold position here. Blackwell will be coming for the North Spring. In the chaos that followed, Penelope refused to remain idle. She helped Sophie and Martha gather buckets, wet blankets, and other supplies that might be needed to fight the spreading fire. From the ranch house porch, they could see the orange glow on the southern horizon, growing brighter by the minute. Will they be able to stop it? Penelope asked anxiously as Morgan and his men rowed toward the blaze. Depends on the wind, Martha said grimly, and how much of a head start the fire has. Wade approached, now armed with rifle and pistol. I'm going to reinforce the men at the North Spring. Caleb will stay here with 4 hands to protect the house. Penelope caught his arm. Be careful, Wade. This could be exactly what Blackwell wants to draw you out. His expression softened briefly. I'll be cautious. Then he was gone, riding north with several men toward the vulnerable water source. The hours that followed were tense and chaotic. Reports came intermittently. The fire was being contained, but slowly. No sign yet of Blackwell's men at the North Spring. Riders had been spotted circling to the west. As dawn broke, Penelope stood on the porch, scanning the horizon for any sign of Wade's return. The fire to the south had diminished, its glow fading in the growing light, but of Wade and his men there was no sign. Something's wrong, she said to Martha, who stood beside her. They should have returned by now, or at least sent word. Martha's face was worried. Maybe they're still watching the spring, making sure Blackwell doesn't make a move, but Penelope's instincts told her otherwise. I'm going to find Caleb. He needs to send men to check. She found the youngest Zane brother near the barn, organizing supplies for the firefighters when they returned. His face grew serious as she explained her concerns. I was thinking the same thing, he admitted. I'll send 2 men to the spring right away. The riders departed at a gallop, tension evident in their posture. Penelope waited with Caleb, anxiety growing with each passing minute. When the men finally returned an hour later, their news confirmed her worst fears. The spring is deserted, one reported grimly. Signs of a fight, bullet holes in trees, blood on the ground, and this. He handed Caleb a folded piece of paper. Caleb opened it, his face paling as he read. It's from Blackwell. He has Wade and 2 of our men. Says he'll release them when we vacate the disputed land, and he glanced at Penelope when Miss Zimmerman leaves the territory. Cold fury washed over Penelope, followed by resolute determination. He's trying to force our hand, using Wade as leverage. What do we do? Caleb asked, looking suddenly young and uncertain without his older brother's guidance. Penelope's mind raced through possibilities, discarding one after another until a plan began to form. Where would Blackwell take them? The Circle B, most likely, Caleb nodded. It's well defended, remote. Then that's where we need to go, Penelope said firmly, but not with guns blazing that would only get Wade and the others killed. What then? Caleb asked. We need leverage of our own, Penelope explained. Something Blackwell values more than this feud, and I think I know what that might be. She outlined her plan quickly, a desperate gambit, but one that might just work if they moved swiftly. Caleb listened, his expression shifting from doubt to cautious hope. It's dangerous, he warned when she finished. So is doing nothing, Penelope countered. Every minute Wade remains Blackwell's prisoner, the danger grows. Decision made, they moved quickly. Morgan had returned from fighting the fire, exhausted but unharmed, and joined their planning. By mid-morning, Penelope was dressed in her plainest clothes, hair covered by a bonnet, seated in the ranch wagon beside Martha. Morgan and 3 trusted hands accompanied them, weapons hidden but accessible. Remember, Penelope said as they prepared to depart, timing is everything. If I'm not out in an hour, proceed with the second plan. The journey to Junction City took just over 2 hours, the nearest telegraph office being located there rather than in Silver Creek. While Morgan and the others waited with the wagon, Penelope and Martha made their way to the bank, a substantial brick building that spoke of the town's prosperity. Inside, Penelope asked to speak with the bank president, presenting her card with its St. Louis address. The combination of her refined accent and the implication of wealth gained them immediate access to Mr. Harrington's private office. "Miss Zimmerman, Mrs. Wilson," he greeted them, curious but polite. "What brings you to Junction City Bank today?" Penelope wasted no time on pleasantries. "Mr. Harrington, I need information about Edward Blackwell's financial dealings, specifically any loans or investments involving Eastern banks." The banker's expression closed immediately. "I'm afraid that's confidential information, Miss Zimmerman." "I couldn't possibly, Mr. Harrington," Penelope interrupted, her voice firm. "Edward Blackwell has kidnapped Wade Zane and two of his ranch hands. He's threatening their lives in pursuit of land that isn't rightfully his. I believe your bank may be unwittingly involved in financing his illegal activities." Harrington's face paled slightly. "That's a serious accusation, one I'm prepared to take to the territorial governor," Penelope said steadily. "Along with evidence that Junction City Bank may be complicit in fraud if you refuse to cooperate." Martha added her own persuasion. "Mr. Harrington, we're not asking you to break the law, we're asking you to help prevent further lawlessness." The banker hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he sighed. "What exactly do you want to know?" "Blackwell came west with substantial capital," Penelope said. "I want to know where it came from, who his financial backers are, and what promises he made to secure their investment." For the next half hour, Harrington shared what he knew, revealing a pattern of deception that extended far beyond Silver Creek. Blackwell had obtained financing from several Eastern investment firms by grossly misrepresenting the value and extent of his holdings. He was, in fact, deeply in debt and facing imminent default unless he could acquire the water rights and additional land he needed to make good on his promises. "His investors are sending a representative next week," Harrington explained. "If they discover the discrepancy between what he claimed and what he actually owns, he'd be ruined," Penelope finished, understanding dawning. "That's why he's become so desperate, so reckless. He's running out of time." Armed with this knowledge and copies of key documents Harrington reluctantly provided, Penelope and Martha made their next stop at the telegraph office. There, Penelope composed messages to 3 different recipients: Blackwell's primary investor in Boston, the territorial governor, and the editor of the Junction City Gazette. Each message was carefully crafted to convey specific information while hinting at more to come. To the Boston investment firm, she detailed discrepancies in Blackwell's reported holdings. To the governor, she outlined Blackwell's pattern of intimidation and violence, including the kidnapping of Wade. To the newspaper editor, she offered exclusive rights to a story of corruption and fraud that would shake the territory. With the telegram sent, Penelope and Martha rejoined Morgan and the others, explaining what they had learned and set in motion. "Now we wait," Penelope said. "But not for long. Blackwell will receive word of the telegrams within hours." They took rooms at the Junction City Hotel, establishing a base from which to monitor developments. By evening, the first response arrived: a telegram from the governor stating he was dispatching a marshal to investigate the allegations. Shortly after, the newspaper editor appeared in person, eager to learn more about the promised story. Penelope shared selected details, carefully balancing the need for publicity with the risk of provoking Blackwell to desperate action. "Print what I've given you," she instructed the editor, "but hold the full story until tomorrow. Lives depend on it." As night fell, they gathered in Penelope's hotel room to finalize their plan. "Tomorrow morning we return to Silver Creek," she explained. "By then, Blackwell will know his financial house of cards is collapsing. He'll be desperate for a solution." "That's when he'll be most dangerous," Morgan warned. "Yes," Penelope agreed, "but also when he'll be most willing to negotiate. His choice will be clear: release Wade and the others in exchange for time to flee, or face financial ruin, criminal charges, and possibly a lynch mob once the full extent of his actions becomes known." The night passed slowly, each hour marked by tension and worry for Wade's safety. Penelope barely slept, her mind replaying all that could go wrong with their plan. By dawn, she was exhausted but resolute, determined to see this through no matter the cost. They departed Junction City at first light, the morning newspapers already circulating with headlines about allegations of massive fraud in land dealings, and territorial governor orders investigation of Circle B ranch owner. The stories were carefully written to avoid libel while making the implications clear to anyone familiar with the situation. As their wagon approached the turnoff to the Circle B, they were met by a rider, one of Blackwell's men, looking nervous and uncertain. "Mr. Blackwell wants to talk," he announced without preamble. "Says to bring Miss Zimmerman to the main house, just her." Morgan immediately objected. "Out of the question, we all go or no one goes." After tense negotiation, they reached a compromise. Penelope and Morgan would go to the house, while Martha and the others waited at the gate with instructions to alert the sheriff if they didn't return within an hour. The Circle B ranch house was an imposing two-story structure, more mansion than frontier home, with a wide veranda and ornate furnishings visible through the windows. As they dismounted, the front door opened to reveal Blackwell himself, his usual polished appearance slightly disheveled. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, his tone icy, "you've been busy." "Where is Wade?" Penelope demanded, dispensing with pleasantries. Blackwell's smile was tight. "Safe for now. Please come inside. We have much to discuss." Inside, the house was as opulent as its exterior suggested: expensive furniture, fine artwork, oriental rugs. The trappings of wealth surrounded them, but Penelope noticed signs of hasty packing: open trunks, empty spaces where ornaments had been removed. "Planning a trip, Mr. Blackwell?" she asked pointedly. His expression hardened. "You forced my hand, Miss Zimmerman. Those telegrams were quite thorough. My investors are most distressed, as they should be," Penelope replied evenly. "You've defrauded them of thousands of dollars." "But that's the least of your crimes, isn't it?" Blackwell studied her, reassessing. "You are a most unexpected adversary. When you first arrived in Silver Creek, I thought you just another Eastern transplant playing at frontier life. I underestimated you." "Many men do," Penelope said simply. "It's often their downfall. Now, where is Wade Zane?" "First, let's discuss terms," Blackwell countered. "You've put me in a difficult position, but not an impossible one. I still hold valuable cards." "Your position is weaker than you think," Penelope informed him. "The governor has dispatched a federal marshal who should arrive by nightfall. The full story of your activities will be in tomorrow's papers. Your men are already deserting. We passed 3 riders heading east as we approached." Blackwell's facade cracked slightly, revealing the desperation beneath. "What do you want?" Wade and his men, unharmed. "Immediate cessation of all claims against the Double Z. Your written confession of ordering the schoolhouse fire and Jimmy Carter's murder. Once we have these things, you'll have 6 hours to leave the territory before the confession is delivered to the authorities." "Impossible," Blackwell snapped. "The confession would hang me." "Only if you're caught," Penelope pointed out. "With your resources, you could be in Mexico by nightfall, beyond the reach of territorial law." A tense negotiation followed, with Blackwell attempting to secure better terms while Penelope remained firm. Finally, seeing no better option, he capitulated. "Very well," he said bitterly. "I'll have Zane brought up from the cellar. The confession will take time to write." "We have paper and pen right here," Penelope said, producing them from her reticule, "and we'll wait." Under Morgan's watchful eye, Blackwell penned his confession, admitting to ordering the schoolhouse burned as a warning to those who opposed my business interests, and directing the Barton brothers to silence Carter before he could reveal ranch operations. He signed it with a flourish of angry defiance. "There," he said, pushing the paper toward Penelope. "Now order my men to bring up Zane." Instead, Morgan stepped forward, taking the confession and verifying its contents before nodding to Penelope. "I'll get Wade and the others myself," he said firmly. "Blackwell, you try anything, and this confession goes straight to the sheriff, no matter what promises were made." Left alone with Blackwell, Penelope maintained her composure despite the hatred visible in his eyes. "You won't get away with this," he said finally. "Men like me always find a way back." "Perhaps," Penelope acknowledged. "But not here, not in Silver Creek. This community has found its voice, Mr. Blackwell. They won't be silenced or intimidated again." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted their exchange. Penelope turned to see Wade entering the room, supported by Morgan and one of the ranch hands. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye crusted with dried blood, but his eyes lit up at the sight of her. "Penelope," he said, his voice hoarse but strong, "should have known you'd find a way." She moved quickly to his side, relief washing over her. "Are you badly hurt?" "Nothing that won't heal," Wade assured her, his gaze never leaving her face. "Blackwell's hospitality left something to be desired, but we survived." Blackwell watched their reunion with cold fury. "You have what you came for. Now get out, all of you. I have preparations to make." 6 hours, Mr. Blackwell," Penelope reminded him. After that, the confession goes to Sheriff Davis. With Wade and the other men safely loaded into the wagon, they departed the Circle B. Once they were beyond sight of the ranch, Wade insisted on hearing the full story of how Penelope had engineered his release. "You exposed his financial fraud," he marveled when she finished explaining. "Something I've suspected for years but could never prove." "Banking connections from St. Louis proved useful," Penelope said modestly. "Once I understood what motivated him, the desperate need to acquire your water rights before his investors discovered his deception, the rest fell into place." Wade shook his head in amazement. "Penelope Zimmerman, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever known." By the time they reached the Double Z, word had spread of Blackwell's imminent departure. Caleb and the ranch hands greeted them with relief and celebration, which turned to concern when they saw Wade's injuries. "I'm fine," he insisted, though he allowed Penelope and Martha to help him inside and tend to his wounds. The cut above his eye required stitches, which Martha performed with practiced efficiency, and his ribs were wrapped to support what appeared to be bruising rather than breaks. "You need rest," Penelope instructed firmly once they had finished. "What I need," Wade corrected her, taking her hand, "is to make something clear. When I was in that cellar, thinking I might not get out alive, all I could think about was you, your courage, your intelligence, your determination. I realized that if by some miracle I survived, I wouldn't waste another day without telling you exactly how I feel." Despite the audience of Martha, Caleb, and Morgan, Wade continued, his voice strong with conviction. "Penelope, I love you. Not just your beauty or your kindness, but your mind, the way you see problems from angles others miss, the way you speak truth without fear, the way you fight for what's right. I want to spend my life with you, building something meaningful together." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes at his declaration. "Wade Zane, I love you too, with all my heart." Their kiss was tender but brief, mindful of Wade's injuries and their audience. When they separated, Penelope found Martha wiping away tears while Morgan and Caleb exchanged knowing grins. "About time," Caleb said cheerfully. "We were starting to think Wade would never get around to it." The next days were filled with activity as news spread of Blackwell's hasty departure from the territory. True to Penelope's ultimatum, they waited 6 hours before delivering his confession to Sheriff Davis, by which time Blackwell and his remaining loyal men had fled south toward the Mexican border. The territorial marshal arrived to find most of the work already done. With Blackwell's signed confession, the Barton brothers still in custody, and multiple witnesses now willing to come forward, the case against Blackwell and his operation was overwhelming. Warrants were issued for his arrest in multiple territories, ensuring he would be a fugitive for the foreseeable future. In Silver Creek, the community began to heal. The new schoolhouse rose quickly, built larger and sturdier than before, with a dedicated library wing that Penelope helped stock with carefully selected volumes. The Double Z Ranch recovered from the fire damage. The lost cattle were a setback, but not a devastating one, and Wade's injuries healed with time and care. Through it all, Penelope and Wade grew closer, their relationship deepening as they worked together to rebuild and strengthen both the ranch and the town. Their different perspectives and complementary skills created a partnership that others in the community came to admire and respect. 2 months after Blackwell's departure, on a clear autumn day with golden light filtering through the cottonwoods, Wade and Penelope were married in the newly completed schoolhouse, a symbol of their commitment not just to each other, but to the community they had fought to protect. Martha, beaming with pride, stood as Penelope's witness. Morgan and Caleb flanked their brother, their faces reflecting genuine joy for Wade's happiness. The entire town turned out for the celebration, recognizing that this union represented something significant for Silver Creek, the joining of Eastern education and Western strength, of principled conviction and practical action. As they exchanged vows, Wade's words echoed their journey together. Penelope, when you first came to Silver Creek, cast out for speaking your mind, I recognized a kindred spirit, someone unwilling to compromise truth for comfort. Today, I make this promise. Speak your mind with me always, for your thoughts and words are precious to me. I will listen, I will consider, I will respect even when we disagree, perhaps especially then. Penelope's response was equally heartfelt. Wade, you offered acceptance when others demanded silence, partnership when others expected submission. With you, I found not just love, but true respect. I promised to speak honestly, to listen openly, to work alongside you in building something that matters: a home, a family, a community based on justice and mutual regard. Their kiss sealed these promises, witnessed by all who had come to see this union of two strong individuals who had found in each other not completion, but amplification, each made more effective, more whole, by the presence of the other. The celebration continued well into the evening, with food and music and dancing under the stars. As night fell, Wade led Penelope away from the festivities toward a waiting buggy decorated with flowers and ribbons. I have something to show you, he said, helping her into the seat beside him. They rode in comfortable silence for a short distance, stopping at the crest of a hill overlooking a peaceful valley. In the moonlight, Penelope could make out the outline of a partially constructed house larger than a cabin, but not as imposing as the main ranch house. What is this? She asked, though her heart already knew the answer. Our home, Wade said simply. If you approve, close enough to the main house to be practical for ranch operations, but with space and privacy for us to build our life together. Penelope's eyes filled with tears of joy as she took in the thoughtfulness of his gift. It's perfect, Wade, absolutely perfect. I wanted you to have a place that was truly ours, he explained, not just my family home where you moved in, a fresh start built together. Like our relationship, Penelope observed, constructed on mutual respect and shared vision. Wade smiled, drawing her close. Exactly like that. As they stood together in the moonlight, surveying what would become their home, Penelope reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Cast out from St. Louis for speaking her mind, she had found in Silver Creek not just acceptance but appreciation for her voice. In Wade, she had found a partner who valued her thoughts as much as her heart, who wanted to hear her opinions, even when they challenged his own. What are you thinking? Wade asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. That sometimes, Penelope replied, what seems like an ending is really a beginning. Being forced to leave St. Louis felt like the worst moment of my life. Now I see it was the first step toward finding where I truly belong. Wade's arms tightened around her. And where is that? She smiled up at him, her heart full of certainty. Here, with you, speaking my mind, building something meaningful, facing whatever comes next together. Their kiss beneath the stars was a promise and a celebration of the past that had brought them together, the present they now shared, and the future they would build side by side. Two strong voices united in purpose and love. In the years that followed, the Zane Ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Wade's practical knowledge combined with Penelope's research and innovative thinking led to improvements that neighboring ranchers soon adopted. Their home became known as a place of learning as well as hospitality, with Penelope establishing regular reading circles for ranch families and organizing a traveling library that brought books to remote homesteads. Silver Creek grew and flourished, the school expanding to accommodate the growing population attracted by the region's stability and opportunity. Blackwell's name faded from local memory, replaced by stories of how the town had stood together against tyranny and won. Wade and Penelope welcomed two children, first a son, Thomas, with his father's blue eyes and his mother's questioning mind, then a daughter, Eleanor, named for Penelope's mother, who inherited Wade's quiet determination along with Penelope's passion for justice. Through all of life's challenges, drought years, economic downturns, political changes in the territory, their partnership remained unshakable. They did not always agree, but they always listened to each other, valuing the different perspectives they brought to every situation. And on quiet evenings, sitting on the porch of the home they had built together, watching their children play in the yard as the sun set over the western hills, Wade would often take Penelope's hand and say, "Tell me what you're thinking." In those moments, Penelope would share her thoughts freely, secure in the knowledge that her voice was not merely tolerated but treasured. And she would remember how it all began with being cast out for speaking her mind and finding a man who said, "Then speak your mind with me always." It was, she reflected, the most precious gift anyone had ever given her, not jewels or land or status, but the simple, profound right to be heard. In return, she had given Wade her heart, her strength, and her unwavering support, creating together a life far richer than either could have built alone. And so they lived, loved, and prospered, two strong voices joined in harmony, creating a legacy of courage, respect, and authentic partnership that would inspire generations to come.